This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Newcastle booked their place at Wembley with a dogged, determined and clinical display at St James's Park, and that was just the banners before kick-off. A more than deserved victory for Eddie Howe's side, who get another crack at healing 70 years of hurt. Arsenal missed their chances when it mattered and then go missing in defence. All together now, do they need a number 9? Or will warm weather training in Dubai and another cholesterol-spiking visit to Salt Bay's restaurant revive their season? To tonight's other semi, just how dangerous is Tottenham's 1-0 lead against Liverpool? Will the new signings make the difference at Anfield? The literal fun police emerge to crack down on the scourge of, checks notes, goal celebrations. We'll round up the main headlines from transfer deadline day, get the latest news from Serie A, take your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, good morning.
Hi, Robyn.
Good morning, Nicky Bandini.
Morning.
And Sam Dalling. Wonderful to have you on.
Good morning, Robyn.
Newcastle 2, Arsenal 0. Newcastle win 4-0 on aggregate. And let's start from the beginning, shall we? It looked like an incredible occasion. I'm usually a bit cynical about these things, but Sam Fender's saxophonist playing local hero before kick-off. Sunderland fan Barry is grimacing. Let's just park that for a second. The atmosphere did look amazing. It looked like, if as a player, if you're going out into that, you're going to be pumped up. A huge result, Sam. Were you expecting this to be as comfortable in the end as it was?
No, in a word. I think that was the surprise. The first leg was actually very tense away from home. And because a lot of people have said, had the second leg been a week later, Newcastle fans would have been very confident going into it. But actually, with that month break, and with Newcastle managing to lose a couple of home Premier League games pretty tamely as well, including only 4 or 5 days ago, and with Arsenal beating Manchester City and all those celebrations that came around that and all the stay humble stuff, and we'll talk about celebrations later, but they didn't lay a glove on Newcastle. But going into it, people were thinking, oh, well, if Arsenal get the first goal, this is going to be a really rough night at St James's Park. And people seem to forget the fact that, well, if Newcastle get the first goal on the night, the tie's almost over. But that's football fans' mentality, isn't it? And there was all these rallying calls for the fans to make cliches like bear pits and things. And there's a group called War Flags who actually do a wonderful job with these kind of tifo displays up at St James's Park. And everyone was very up for it. And I was just a bit surprised. Arsenal looked toothless. I saw them down at Wolves a couple of weeks ago, and they did win that game ultimately, but they didn't have a lot up front. And I know Odegaard hit the post early on, and that could have been a game-changing moment or a tie-changing moment. But other than that, Dubravka barely had to work for it. And I mean, we'll come on to it, but Eddie Howe, I think, deserves a lot of credit for that, for the way he set Newcastle up. But it just one of those wonderful nights in football, those occasions where you're desperate for those nights, and then when they come, the whole day and the days before, you're really scared of them and terrified. But actually, it was much more relaxing than I think anyone anticipated.
And Nicky, this was the interesting thing, wasn't it? Because we thought Arsenal were going to bounce into this after what happened at the weekend. But because of the way the game was and they needed to come out, it kind of suited Newcastle really well, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm reluctant with the we there, Robyn, because I think I, even after the first leg, was the one person in the pod studio saying, no, I don't think Arsenal are going to come back from this, actually. I think this feels very much like the dynamic of Eddie Howe's Newcastle against Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. It feels like Eddie Howe's got Arteta's number, and I didn't see where this confidence was that Arsenal would have a different answer to what they've delivered so far. In fact, I think the most dispiriting part of the whole night, coming at this from the Arsenal perspective, was hearing Arteta afterwards saying, oh, it's just came down to taking chances and scoring goals, because if Odegaard had scored, it would have all been different. Sure, if Odegaard scores, it's 2-1 in the tie and the mood will change a little bit. But beyond that one chance, exactly as Sam's just said, it wasn't a close game. This wasn't a game where you think Arsenal, oh, they got unlucky. It was a very emphatic result, and an emphatic result across 2 legs. And what's almost most, I think, what almost compounds it most is that Arsenal even got the free warning shot in this game because there was that goal disallowed at the beginning. There was that Isaac goal disallowed, and you thought, okay, you got away with one there because it was a very narrow offside. Felt much more a result of luck than judgment that goal is offside. And even with that, there wasn't some resounding response from Arsenal in the tie, I didn't think. And Newcastle absolutely thoroughly deserved it, looked more up for it and played better football across both legs.
And Barry, I think what another alarming thing was, a lot has been mentioned about Gabriel and particularly William Saliba just looked so, I don't know, almost frightened. Like Isak really put the frighteners on them. They didn't look sure-footed at all, which is really unusual to see.
Yeah, they're normally fairly unflappable, and Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon had them in a state of almost constant panic last night. William Saliba, I can't remember him having a worse game in an Arsenal shirt. I don't think they were helped by the fact that Declan Rice went AWOL in another big game. I was lavish in my praise of him on Monday, but he did nothing last night. It reminded me of his performance over both legs of Arsenal's Champions League exit at the hands of Bayern Munich last night, and a couple of big England games where Bruno Guimaraes and Fabian Schär just had his number, really, and he wasn't, I don't know, nasty enough to be able to deal with him. He was almost bullied. It hurts to say, but as a Sunderland fan, it was an annoyingly good Newcastle performance. Eddie Howe lined up with three central defenders, one of whom Schär had a licence to get forward, and that's where their second goal came from. He put in Kieran Trippier, right wing back, instead of Tino Livramento. That helped. Very streetwise player who's very good at needling opposition players. And then Odegaard's miss, and Newcastle scoring their opener from the subsequent kick-out. That was probably the turning point in the game. But I don't think Arsenal were ever in this at all. It was a pretty disappointing performance. A lot of their fans will say, it's just the Carabao Cup, we've bigger fish to fry. But the worry for them is they've lost 3 times against Newcastle now this season, and they still have to play them again in the league. So, and I haven't seen any evidence to suggest they'll win that one. What I enjoyed quite a lot about this game is Gary Neville on co-coms and Sky just going through his full repertoire of orgasmic groans, yowls and yelps. It was something else. He really went through them a lot. But it was a great performance from Newcastle, and they absolutely did a number on Arsenal in this game. Thoroughly deserving winners.
Maybe there'll be like release an album of Gary Neville.
Oh God!
Oh my God!
So, well, just like a soundboard, maybe
a concept album, double LP.
Yeah. Or like a kid's toy where you press the. This is where you're nearly giving away a good chance, and this is a bad tackle. He went through the whole repertoire. I've got to say, shout out to our colleague Seb Hutchinson. I've been there as a commentator when the game is dead and you've got basically half an hour to just have a little chat, and because there's nothing going on at all. But that's credit to Newcastle, Sam. How did Eddie Howe set the team up? Because it did just work to perfection, it seemed.
Yeah, and there's been one of the criticisms levelled at him is he's very much a plan A manager, and that there's no other way. He hasn't got a different way of playing, and Newcastle saw that against Fulham in that defeat at the weekend. And in games where Newcastle are expected to be on the front foot and have possession, that might be true, because he doesn't yet quite have the players to really dominate games in the way that, say, a Man City or an Arsenal have done previously. But in this one, the rumours started a few hours before kickoff that he was going to go to 5 at the back. And immediately everyone went, minds went back to the last 20 minutes at Emirates where Newcastle played 5-5-0 and properly did. No strikers, no forward players, just sat back and we thought, after all he said, because he was asked in the build-up, 2-0's a dangerous scoreline. And he went, well, it is a dangerous scoreline, but only if you don't play well, which I quite liked, actually, as a line from him. But he set up 5 at the back, and actually that is where Eddie Howe is very good, particularly against Mikel Arteta. He seems to have his number. To have these three centre-backs, the height to combat Arsenal's set-piece threat. I thought bringing Trippier back, actually, he's barely played in the last year, really. Livramento has very much overtaken him as first-choice right-back. And Trippier's, if there was any doubt that he's still very much a leader in that group, I think that was extinguished last night. And then he had his centre-backs. Basically, he had people man-marking people. So Cher would follow Declan Rice wherever he was going. We saw it in the first leg as well. You'd have Dan Burn and Sven Botman up in the opposition half following Kai Havertz. Bruno Guimaraes said afterwards his job was basically to follow Partey around. And we saw it work. Like, I don't know, for that second goal, I have no idea what David Raya is doing, because I watched it back a few times.
Wasn't on, was it? Wasn't on.
He can clearly see, like, it's not like Cher's just come into his eye line too late after he's hit the ball. He's played it to Rice in real trouble, and maybe he thought it was some sort of mirage. Like, what is the Newcastle centre half really doing there? He can't actually be up there, but he was, and it just worked. Everything Howe set up, and Guimaraes said it in his post-match interview. He said actually the game was won pre-match because Eddie gave us this game plan. We followed it to the letter. I think he said they had three sessions after the weekend. They were in on the Wednesday morning, because you always wonder what footballers do on big nights like that. It's a long time to wait until 8:00, but they were in walking through the plans in the morning. So credit to Eddie Howe for that. That definitely was a plan B, and it definitely worked.
That's one of the mysteries of football calendars, isn't it? Somehow the 15-minute difference between 7:45 and 8:00 feels massive. It feels like it's a huge amount later whenever you go to a game at 8:00 at 7:45 for some reason.
No, it really does, doesn't it?
I don't know why.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It's weird that, I guess it were for us as well. It's just that little bit later getting home, isn't it? More bad news, Nicky. Again, Martinelli coming off. I mean, now they're really light in that position, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a shame there wasn't a month-long period in the season when you could try to sign some extra forwards. I don't know what if football would consider that in future seasons. No, it is strange. It's strange that Arsenal have taken this position of not reinforcing up front. Obviously, it's you can make a pretty logical case for not overspending in January. It's very easy to overspend in January, and I certainly think with how much it costs to buy a really top forward, you don't want to make a big investment in January and get it wrong just because you're rushing, because you have this idea that you need to compete for the league title right now, when in reality you're already 6 points behind the leaders, and that might not do it anyway, right? You don't want to make a bad investment because you're chasing something that you might not be able to fix. At the same time, it is a real injury crisis up there already with Saka and Jesus, and now you add another player onto it and you think, well, couldn't we have done something? Couldn't we have done, it doesn't have to have been the first choice, doesn't have to have been the best option available for long term, but couldn't there have been a loan deal? Couldn't there have been some option that could have been found just to have another body in there? Because it does feel very thin with Martinelli going out as well. And it sounds like hamstring injury, it could be at least a few weeks on that.
I did want to mention, Barry, that we did get to hear what Simon Hooper sounds like,
yes.
Which I wasn't expecting. Producer Joel saying that he sounded like a child readying to deliver his one-liners in activity because he's so nervous.
Yeah.
I wonder if referees actually want to do this. Do they?
Probably not. I mean, when you're only sort of performance or your delivery of one line, and that line is chalking off a goal for the home side in this febrile bear pit, you can understand his nerves. But he didn't sound like I thought he'd sound. I thought he'd sound more northern. But I just expect all referees to sound northern. I don't even know where Simon Hooper is from, but...
Because this is something that they have in the NFL. Like you have this concept in American football of it's normal for the referees to speak. So I think I understand where they're coming from as someone who's watched a lot of that. And I think in the NFL certainly it works. It's a very different sport with very different flow to it. But I think I'm in favour of the concept of it, but it definitely felt so uncomfortable to him in that second. And I was saying, I just couldn't get over how much he was pointing at Isaac. Like, he didn't want anyone looking at him. He's like, it was that guy. Yeah. Don't blame me for this. He was offside. He should feel bad about what he's done because he's caused you to stop having fun, not me. Yeah, I don't know. In the NFL, they have these yellow flags they throw on the pitch to sort of indicate a penalty. And I almost feel like he needed something else to look at. So he wasn't just jabbing his finger at Isaac.
Oh, I'm sure that's to come. Yeah, and we'll all get very angry about that as well. Jack says, was it the ball? Squeaky says, is it fair that the Carabao Cup second leg was played with the same type of ball used in the first leg? That's in reference to Mikel Arteta mentioning the ball after the first leg. He was actually asked about it in his defence. Newcastle fans were chanting, is it the ball, Mikel? And then after the game, Newcastle posted on Twitter a picture of the ball with the caption, the culprit. I'm sure Tony Scholes will punish them for that. I'm sure. More on that later, listener. Barry, just to sort of wrap things up. I mean, this is everyone's saying, oh, they're going to go to Dubai, Arsenal, and it's going to be exactly like last season because after they went to Dubai, they were really good and they barely lost a game. I mean, we can't really assume that's going to happen again, are we? And even if they didn't, they still might not win anything this season.
Yeah, that's very possible. It's probably likely, to be fair, but I've never been to Dubai. I can't speak for its restorative qualities. It's a place I have no interest whatsoever in ever visiting. Yeah, it's good for them to get whatever it is, 10 days off and go and get a bit of sun and some nice food and a bit of R&R. I'd say they'll be, if they played really well and still not got through, you'd go fair enough. But it's like when Newcastle lost that Carabao Cup final against, who was it, Manchester United 2 years ago. They just didn't turn up, didn't lay a glove on them. Arsenal were like this last night. It was just a very poor performance, a bit after the Lord Mayor's show, and they've left themselves open to accusations that they maybe over-celebrated or, emphatic win over a really fallible Manchester City side. Maybe they got notions above their station. I don't know, but it was poor from Arsenal and a very, as I said, annoyingly good performance from Newcastle.
I quite enjoyed Anthony Gordon getting the line, we've got to stay humble, into his post-match interview as well. Maybe they just were the words that came to his head in the moment, who knows, but it was very good. I'm
enjoying this callback, but is it now getting a bit a bit tired? I think no. Well, let's keep absolutely flogging it like a Stuart Lee stand-up routine. I think that'll do. Sam, last word for you on this. We'll get to the second leg of the second tie for tonight. But do you feel like Newcastle will have learnt lessons from last time? Obviously, you want to enjoy this moment, don't you? Getting to a final, but they want to go one step. They want to go the whole way this time, won't they? It's been so long since a trophy for Newcastle.
Oh, it's been a long time. I hope so. And it's felt throughout the run, particularly the quarterfinal. The first time around, and we're talking about 2 years ago, there was a sense of occasion with everything, and everything was celebrated. And there was such joy, and rightly as it should be for the fans. But I think Howe has intimated in some of the stuff he said that maybe that build up to the final, the players and the staff inadvertently got so caught up in the occasion because they became heroes just by getting to a final. It was such a big deal. And as Barry said, they completely didn't turn up on the day. And I go back to the semi-final first leg 2 years ago, beat Southampton 1-0 away. And it was a wonderful night. And I took my partner, then wife, with me. And I don't drink that often, but I had a few drinks that night. And at the end of a 1-0 win against Southampton, we were all ready to leave. We clapped the players off, and she went to the loo and said, "Oh, I'll meet you here." And I said, "Okay, I'll just do a bit more celebrating." And the unused subs came out to warm down, and I, for about 10, 15 minutes, were just voluntarily down there singing the Matt Ritchie song at Matt Ritchie with a couple of hundred other people. And I wandered out eventually to meet her at the waiting place, and she was fuming. We had to walk back along this river in Southampton, and the whole time she was about 10 paces ahead of me. She was driving us home. I was just following in her wake, and the line, "Celebrate when you've won something," has become famous in our household and amongst our friends. It gets used all the time. And so that is a mantra I'm stuck with. By the way, I should say, I then realised that she's a Watford fan, and in her bedroom there is a whole photo frame, her and her dad, this Watford scoffing. It was a blooming semi-final win against Wolves. So this whole celebrate when you've won something, I was like, come on, you can't do that. But that the point I'm trying to make is celebrate when you've won something. And I think the players and the staff, and hopefully the fans this time, will hold on to that mantra, because it's been a tough run, but there is still a final. It would be lovely to win it.
Sam, I don't want to intrude or pry into the nitty-gritty of your private life, but you refer to her as your partner, then wife, and have subsequently referred to her bedroom. So I don't know if things aren't going well in the Dalling household.
I will correct that. We don't have to edit it, but yes, current wife.
Oh no, Sam, that's
worse. That's even worse. Just my wife.
Yeah.
My wife and her childhood bedroom at her
okay.
house. But that story suddenly feels like a really bad idea.
Important to keep all of that in, I think, now for the context. Yes, I think we'll leave that there for part one. Thank you to everyone for the lovely comments on Blue Sky about having my baby here. But I understand there's probably double that to people who are quite annoyed. But just to let you know, I do have my baby Solly here in case you can hear any sort of sounds that you might not want to.
Is he named after Solly March?
Yeah, that's his middle name, Solly March Cowen. No. No, it's a family name, but yeah, happily. Okay. It's lovely to see Solly March back, returning to full fitness. But that's another story. Anyway, that'll do for part one. In part two, we'll preview tonight's League Cup second leg between Liverpool and Spurs. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Liverpool against Spurs tonight at Anfield. Spurs lead 1-0 on aggregate. Barry, I'm not sure if a second leg's going to suit Spurs at this stage. They lead, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the sort of betting markets or anything. I'm assuming they're not going to be favourites to progress, are they?
I don't know is the answer to that question. Look, I don't know how this game is going to go. You would think Liverpool probably have enough about them to turn the tie around. I think I would prefer Liverpool to get to the final because I'd be more confident in them beating Newcastle than Spurs. But I think a Tottenham-Newcastle final would be really interesting because you've these two perennial losers going toe-to-toe in a final.
That's how Sky are going to bill it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. It is true. And they'd both be so scared of losing that game.
So bad, but good, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It could be an awful, awful final for everyone involved, just the terror and the apprehension. But great for us. I'm not going to say I'm a neutral because, I don't want Newcastle to win a trophy to end their trophy drought. I think I would like Spurs to get through, and I think a Newcastle-Spurs final would be really interesting and fun, albeit not for the fans of either team involved until the final whistle is blown and or the penalty shootout ends, at which point one of them will be beside themselves with delight and the others will be just absolutely devastated. But Ange, he has got this second season win a trophy thing about him, and he's reminded journalists of it earlier this season. And who's to say Tottenham can't get their act together tonight and finish this off?
It looks like it's going to be another slightly makeshift defence. Dragusin ruled out probably to the end of the season and maybe beyond with an ACL injury. Romero is out. Not much information on Van der Ven, but it sounds like he's not going to be able to be involved. They're also missing Solanke, Maddison, Werner, Johnson, Udogie and Vicario.
Yeah, okay, I'm now revising my opinion. Liverpool will win about 5-0.
But Ange wins a trophy in his second season, Barry. That's what we have to cling on to. But Nicky, it sounds like Kevin Danso might start. He's signed on loan from Lens. Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, they got a huge injury list. Do they do Ange ball or do they try and hang on to this goal lead? This is the question.
Mate, we only play one way, don't we, mate? That's got to be the answer. I'm curious to see how bold he is with the new signings because, of course, Matisse Tello as well coming in on loan. Interesting player, young player, certainly fascinated to see. There is this journalist in me hungry for the narrative that wants to see these people just thrown into the match and see what happens. Because, yeah, on paper, it's very hard to make a case for expecting anything other than Liverpool being a better team than Tottenham at home, where they haven't lost to Tottenham in, about more than half a decade? Probably much more than that. I'm not even certain when it is that Tottenham last won at Anfield. It's a long time. And so you expect the expectable result. But there is definitely something, and I think certainly you could say that Newcastle's energy was different in the cup game last night to what it had been in the league games immediately preceding it. There is something to the fact that this is Tottenham's entire season right here at this point, whereas it's realistically the last on Liverpool's list of priorities. But it's a semi-final and it's at Anfield, and I don't think they're going to not show up. I fully expect Liverpool to play very well tonight. But if you want a case for why it could be different, that's the best I've got.
Sam, Liverpool do look sort of machine-like this season, don't they? I think it would be a huge surprise, even though they go into this 1-0 down.
Yes, I was just having a quick Google, and the Opta supercomputer, for what it's worth, has run all its simulations, and it's pretty much guaranteeing a Liverpool victory. They are... I can't look at this as a neutral. My head, I'm trying to step back at it and be journalistic, but all my head is saying, who would you rather play in the final? Who would you rather play in the final? And I think the answer is definitely Tottenham Hotspur, and that's not saying Newcastle would definitely beat them, but who knows? But as a fan, I would prefer the frailties of Tottenham and Ange ball, which could end up winning 5-0 and could end up in a Newcastle victory. So I think what I'm trying to say is, yes, Liverpool are too efficient. They are too clinical in what they do. There's less uncertainty. And I think when you are, as Barry phrases it, a perennial loser, when you're not quite at a level where you can function at your very best week in, week out, what you need in a game is uncertainty. And Liverpool don't really have that, albeit Newcastle went head to head with them and drew 3-3 earlier in the season. But at home, who they got in the FA Cup, Plymouth as well. I know they're going away. There's a Merseyside derby, but when you're winning and when you're on a roll, I'd love to say hopefully Ange can go there, and he's got to play Ange ball, by the way. He can't suddenly go 5-5-0. But I just think Liverpool have too much.
It's one of those ties that makes you a bit sad for no away goals rule again, doesn't it? Because if it's 1-0 and a goal for Tottenham effectively means that Liverpool have to score 3, then it's a really fascinating setup. But I think there was a lot of talk before last night's game about the first goal. Oh, if Arsenal score the first goal, it's going to change the dynamic. I'm not even that sure that if Tottenham score the first goal, if it's going to change the dynamic that much, because it's still Liverpool at home and I still expect them to score at least 2. So maybe I'm wrong on that, and maybe there will be a first goal that changes the shape of it. But I do think that it is one of those where if away goals was in place, it would feel very different to how it feels without away goals.
There's just no world in which the last thing Ange says before those Tottenham players is, lads, keep it tight for the first 20 minutes and quieten the crowd.
Park that bus, mate. Yeah, I can't see it. Nicky, you mentioned Matthias Tell. A good piece in The Guardian from Andy Brassel, because honestly I didn't know anything about him. And actually subsequently, so he's joined on loan, but Ange, he actually used the word mate. We're not taking the piss here. He said we're going to sign him at the. So that's quite a big statement from him, isn't it? But yeah, it sounds like he could be extremely exciting.
Yeah, he's again, because he's 19 years old. We haven't seen a lot of him at the senior level yet, and there is a lot of very positive buzz around him, and it's somewhat surprising that Bayern have allowed him out of their grasp. But I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to see what sort of player he's going to become, because the buzz around him, as I say, is very positive. I haven't had a chance to read Andy's article yet, so I can't comment on what Andy's written, unfortunately. But I know a lot of people think very highly of Tell.
And also, Barry, they've signed Mason Mellier for what St Patrick's Athletic have announced is a record transfer fee for a League of Ireland player. You've been following this County Wicklow lad closely, I'm sure.
I've never heard of him before, I'm afraid. I used to follow League of Ireland football. I used to go to Shamrock Rovers a lot because I lived near the ground. They were sort of renting or playing in, ground sharing in when they were homeless many years ago. But I don't keep an eye on League of Ireland proceedings really anymore. Although Damien Duff is the manager of Shelburne, he's always good value for a controversial quote. He insists that the League of Ireland is the best league in the world. I wouldn't necessarily agree, but what was the fee out of interest? Do you know? Or
£1.5 million, possibly rising to 3.5 with a 20% sell-on. So clearly, highly rated.
Well, I mean, for a League of Ireland side, that is like winning the lottery. Yeah, it's just massive.
Let's touch on the Premier League game from Monday. That was a long time ago. Chelsea 2, West Ham United 1. Can anyone remember what happened in this game? Did anyone watch it closely? Anyone want to comment on it?
I was more focused on Middlesbrough Sunderland, but it wasn't a great game. Chelsea probably just about deserved to win it with two very scrappy goals. Jared Bowen was back for West Ham. He scored a lovely finish to put them ahead, but they ultimately lost. I suppose the main talking points are that Nicholas Jackson has now gone 8 games without scoring. Chelsea finally dropped Robert Sanchez. Philip Jorgensen was in goal for them in this game. And West Ham had a lot of injuries, and Evan Ferguson was looking on from the stands because he'd only signed for them that day. It was the close of play on deadline day. So, it wasn't very good from what I saw of it.
Yeah, important 3 points for Chelsea. It moves them back into the top 4. Seems to be a lot of movement in terms of the top 4 in the Premier League. Speaking of deadline day, Barry, your winners and losers. I know we like to say who's won the transfer window. I wonder if it might be Aston Villa, just because of they've signed people that we all know and we all assume they're going to be brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at winners and losers, you kind of have Aston Villa and Man City, I would say, have a foot in each camp. City spent an awful lot of money. Young players who are largely unproven and probably won't hit their stride until next season, I reckon. Omar Marmoush, obviously, he seems to have hit the ground running, and he's a class act. Villa obviously brought in 77 million euros, so what's that, about 68 million quid, selling John Duran, got rid of Jadon Philogene, Diego Carlos, loaned out Emi Buendia, Kostin Nedeljkovic and Samuel Jr., and brought in Rashford, Mallon, Andreas Garcia and Axel Disasi in on loan from Chelsea. I think they needed another defender, which they didn't get. Tottenham's wage to revenue ratio is famously low. It's like under 50%. Villa's is almost 100% now, if not over 100%. So that's a worry for them, because if they don't qualify for the Champions League, they're going to be in big trouble financially, I think, which could lead to more ticket price rises. And a lot of their fans were upset this season when the owners said they had to jack up Champions League ticket prices for the PSR thing. I think maybe the winners of the transfer window were probably Bournemouth, Brentford and Forest, because they managed to hold on to all these players they have who lots of other clubs wanted. So that's a win for them. We've spoken about Spurs. Kinski came in, Danso, Mateus Tell, so that's good because they clearly need more bodies in. And in terms of losers, I'd say, well, Arsenal didn't sign anyone. Newcastle didn't sign anyone. They loaned Lloyd Kelly to Juventus, having only brought him in the summer. And he's probably not going to come back to Newcastle. Miggy Almiron's gone back to Atlanta, the MLS Atlanta, as opposed to Serie A Atalanta. Leicester done nothing really. They bought badly in the summer and have done nothing to improve their situation. And yeah, Manchester United, they didn't have a good window either, did they? They brought in this Patrick Dorgu guy from Lecce, bought some youngster from Arsenal, Aidan Heaven, and sold Rashford, didn't replace him, which is sort of concerning, seeing as they have two strikers there who Ruben Almiron doesn't seem to have any faith in. And they were trying to get rid of Garnacho and couldn't. So yeah, I'd say they had a bad window. And then Chelsea, I just don't know anymore. They seem to have shipped out quite a lot of the players we were all scratching our heads at them buying during the summer. So, yeah, maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't.
And then, yeah, brought back Chalobah, who was then benched for the West Ham game. So it's still very, very confusing at Stamford Bridge. Sam, I think we didn't expect Newcastle to sign anyone. Eddie Howe seemed to expect that too. But, I mean, it must be frustrating, especially you've lost, as Barry said, Almiron and Lloyd Kelly.
Well, we hoped. We didn't necessarily expect. But yeah, the line is, well, that's 3 transfer windows in a row now. Howe hasn't been able to strengthen the first team, the actual starting 11. And there is that worry. It's a bit of a gamble, basically. They're gambling on getting into the Champions League, finishing in what looks like it's going to be the top 5, which is very possible. It's the same owners, but the people who front the club, Amanda Staveley in particular, I think they were more gamblers, and they had to come in and they said yes. They wanted to feed the manager. They wanted this momentum and the crowd to get behind them. So like buying Anthony Gordon in a January window a couple of years ago. And I think they were stung badly last June when they were scrambling around, initially thinking, oh, we're going to have to sell one of the crown jewels. In the end, they sold Minter and they sold Anderson, effectively for 15 million quid, right? Elliot Anderson's gone to a team who are 3rd in the Premier League, playing midfield. He's a young lad come from the academy, and they've got 15 million quid for him. And they don't want that to happen again, basically. And Paul Mitchell's come in, and for the first time, it's not purely down to Howe, and there's someone trying to look at it long term. So we have to, in inverted commas, trust the process, because what it sounds like they want to do is actually come the last couple of weeks of June this year is be in a position to take advantage of teams who are going, oh, we need to sell somebody to make up the PSR numbers and swoop in. But I think that is risky, because if you don't get in the Champions League, there's no way Isak and people like Guimaraes and Tonali, well, are they going to hang around? And maybe they do have to sell Isak, maybe at some point. That is just going to be the reality for the money they can get to him. But it is disappointing, because for 2 or 3 years we've been saying, oh, need a new right winger, need a new right centre back. But it's going to be slow. I think the Villa one, I think that's a real risk for them as well. They've gambled, because bringing players, it's an old school January transfer window, that, right? Bringing players in on loan who, a couple of them probably have no intention of being there come June. So you've got this, you're paying all their wages. And then come the summer, you're just in the same position again, needing those players. So I think they're going gambling on Champions League finish, and maybe they'll get there. I think Wolves actually had a decent window as well, because they didn't lose Cunha. They brought in a couple of defenders. I saw Agbadou play against Arsenal. I thought he was very good. So I think their transfer window has given them a chance of staying up. It looks like it's 3 from 4. So I think Wolves had a good window.
Could I also add, for the benefit of Max Rushton, who's probably busy at the minute and not staying across all the comings and goings, that just for Max's benefit, Jay Rodriguez has gone to Wrexham. Max always struggles to know where Jay Rodriguez is at any given time.
Yeah, he always likes to know his movements, doesn't he, Jay Rodriguez? He's got him tracked. The next section we're calling Tony Scholes Fun Police. The Premier League may consider punishments for individual players if they feel celebrations are damaging the reputation of the game or could inflame opposition fans or players. So the Premier League's Chief Football Officer Tony Scholes has said there's a balance. I think we all like to see celebrations. Some of the celebrations have been very funny, entertaining, but there's a line. Once it crosses over into mockery or criticism, then we would need to deal with it. As I said in the group, we're one step away from seeing a sign coming up saying no ball games, aren't we? Come on, this is ridiculous. And also, yeah, as producer Joel has pointed out, who's going to be judging what's inflammatory and what's not? Is it going to be VAR? Was that enough like a seagull? I mean, this is ludicrous to me. Yeah,
it does seem weird. Look, I don't know the context in which Tony Scholes said this. Did he just, stand on a box in Hyde Park and announce it, or was he asked? He didn't name any players specifically, but I noted from social media that quite a lot of Arsenal fans seem to have decided it's a dig at Miles Lewis-Skelly. It probably is. And Iliman Ndiaye, who famously got booked for impersonating a seagull. again, all we want is consistency. You know, Jamie Vardy's a total wind-up merchant. I always find his celebrations amusing. He didn't get booked for impersonating an eagle when he scored against Crystal Palace. But Illiman enjoy, you know, are you allowed... You're allowed mock eagles, which I would say are far more majestic birds than seagulls. But, you know, the line is drawn somewhere between an eagle and a seagull, clearly. But I'm all for it. I think it's all good fun. And it's the same in comedy, you know, stand-up comedy. Oh, there's a line, you can't... I think you can joke about anything as long as you do it properly and tactfully and cleverly. So it's up to the players to put thought and nuance into their celebrations.
As a Brighton resident who has not once but twice had food thieved from me by a seagull, I think they deserve all the mockery they get.
Well said. I mean, I think Jamie Vardy's going to hand in his resignation with immediate effect, isn't he? This is his... It's his shtick.
I don't want to keep bringing this to the NFL, but the NFL had this a few years ago. I think it was the late 2000s. There was rules introduced about celebrating because, fans were branding it the No Fun League for a while because they decided people were taking it too far, and they said you weren't allowed to do celebrations that involved more than one of your teammates, and you weren't allowed to use props, and you weren't allowed to. I think it was rules about like how long you were allowed to leave your feet and everything. It was really precise, and I think after a few years they did eventually wind a lot of that back because they realised it was a bit of a nonsense and that it was indeed just making something that should be fun no fun for no reason. I'm with Baz. It's about how you do it, and of course the line isn't always totally clear to everyone, but are we really thinking that just because someone else did a celebration first, if you do the same celebration, that's crossed some absolute line of moral code? It's not like Haaland's celebration is honouring some loved relative or a part of his culture. It's just a little celebration.
Yeah, let's just hope that this is a non-story that doesn't... Because there's literally like no fun. We don't like fun. This is not entertainment anymore at all. That'll do for part 2. I mean, yeah, that was me talking about the story, not this podcast, by the way, hopefully, for some people. That'll do for part 2. In part 3, we'll talk to Nicky about Serie A. Welcome back to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. A quick whip around Italy, Nicky, and your piece from the weekend was talking about the Milan derby and Kyle Walker's bow.
Yeah, Kyle Walker made his debut at the weekend. Pretty solid debut in the Milan derby and a good draw for Milan. They very nearly won that game. They had won the 2 previous derbies, but before that they had been on a really rough run against Inter. I think it was 6 losses in a row. So a nice start for him in a slightly odd derby because there's a current investigation going on to the organised supporters groups on both sides of the Milan derby and ties to criminal groups. And so there was no choreografia, none of the usual what has become called a tifo in English, which always annoys the Italians a little bit because tifo is a bit of it was a strange atmosphere going into that game, but it was ended up being a very entertaining derby, and Walker made a solid start in it. Oddly, with this last night, you had Arsenal playing in the Carabao Cup while Milan were playing in the Coppa Italia quarter-final. And I think Milan had more English players on the pitch than Arsenal did because they had not just Kyle Walker, but also Tomori, who of course nearly joined Tottenham in the transfer window, and also Tammy Abraham up front, who scored twice. So a very English contingent at Milan at the moment, and all playing pretty well. Walker played again last night, and positive reviews. Tomori had another good game, and Abraham, as I say, with a couple of goals. So an English moment happening at Milan, perhaps.
And Scott, how's our Scots getting on as well in Napoli? Scott McTominay seems to have really become a cult hero very quickly.
McTominay's been great, and Napoli are top of the league. That was the thing with that draw for Milan against Inter. It was 2 points dropped for Inter. Now, later in the evening, Napoli had a chance to build their lead at the top and wound up themselves very nearly winning, but conceding an injury time goal in much the same way as Milan had. They conceded an injury time goal against Roma. So it's very, very tight, and Inter have a chance to pull level with them if they win their game in hand. But McTominay's been an absolute hit. He's just, I feel like I say this every time I come on, but he's just absolutely become one of those Antonio Conte players. I think every team that Conte goes to, he has his pets. He has his guys who are just the ones who are all in on his project. They're the ones that Conte looks to and trusts they're going to do the work, and so they become undroppable. And I think that McTominay has become one of those for Conte at Napoli, and he's doing what I think even Manchester United fans who certainly had not been universal in appreciating him while he was there, but I think even amongst Manchester United fans, there was appreciation for the fact that he was a midfielder who could break the lines and score goals. And I think his ability to do that has been really valuable for a Napoli team that did need to reinvent its attack this season, because Osimhen went in the summer and then Kvaratskhelia has gone now in the January transfer window. But they've become a different team with a different way of attacking, and having that line-breaking ability, that midfield scorer, a goal scorer behind Lukaku up front, has been really, really valuable.
We mentioned Napoli, so they're top into second. Atalanta, Lazio, Juve below them. Who else should we be looking out for? I always enjoy checking in on Uncle Claudio. He's doing not too badly at Roma. He took a point off Napoli, as you mentioned.
Yeah, he's certainly calmed the waters a bit at Roma, who had this extremely, I don't know what the right word is for it. They had a very chaotic start to this season with Daniele De Rossi, who of course got a contract extension at the end of last season, then getting fired almost immediately, which is not just a decision you can make about whether or not he's doing well as a manager in Rome. He's one of the city's great sons and one of the ones who the fans adore, and who of course was the deputy to Francesco Totti for all those years and eventually the captain himself. And so to treat someone like that, giving them the contract extension and then tossing them out after whatever it was, 4 or 5 games at the start of the season, went down very badly. Ivan Juric came in, didn't fix the situation. So Ranieri comes in and he's a true Roman who can calm the fans down a bit, and has. But they are still 9th in the table. Results have improved, but it's still a long way off where the club's meant to be, which is in the Champions League places. And I think this conversation about whether or not it's going to be 4 or 5 spots is going to be a really important one in Italy this season, because you've currently got Inter and Napoli absolutely having a title race, as you said. Atalanta looking pretty solid for 3rd place, even though they've lost a bit of momentum recently. But then after that, you've got Lazio, who've looking like the best of this group of teams through the season. And then you've got Juventus, Milan and Roma, who are all clubs who absolutely aspire to and believe they should be in the Champions League, who are running to keep up. So the top 4 might not include any of those teams. Even the top 5 is not a guarantee that those teams are going to get into, but they're all doing what they can to get there in the second half of the season. And Milan had a very aggressive transfer window. They obviously brought in Joao Felix from Chelsea. They also signed Santiago Gimenez. Those 2 players combined for a goal in the Coppa Italia last night. They've done plenty of more business even than that this January. And you can see there's a bit of desperation actually amongst clubs like Roma and Milan to be in there and get that Champions League money. And I think it's going to shape up for a very interesting race amongst those clubs in the second half of the season, on top of the title race.
There's been a little bit of EFL action this week. Oxford United's unbeaten run under Gary Rowett is over. They were beaten 1-0 at Burnley. We gave Burnley numerous chances to score before doing it ourselves. An own goal from Michael Helik. Another clean sheet for Burnley. 9 goals conceded in 31 games so far this season. It's absolutely absurd. Coventry 0, Leeds 2 last night. Leeds beat the informed Coventry. They stay top of the Championship. And Barry, your Mackham minute for Billy Balance, because there was too much Newcastle for your liking today.
Yeah, far too much Newcastle. So we topped the show with that, so we need to tail it with some Sunderland love. I thoroughly enjoyed their win over Middlesbrough Monday night. It was a really, really good game. Sunderland won 3-2. The winner came pretty late, I think with about 3 minutes to go. A Ryan Giles comedy own goal, the ball clanking in off his shins from about 8 yards out. But the takeout from this game has to be Enzo Lefebvre, who I'd never heard of a fortnight ago. He's come in on loan to Sunderland from Roma, and he was just by a mile the best player on the pitch. You sometimes see a game where one player is just so much better than everyone else, and he was that guy. I think if Sunderland get promoted, they're obliged to buy him, and obviously now that I've seen him once and he was outstanding, I will expect that level of performance every single game. Yeah, because my mind is big. But he was just different gravy to everyone else on the pitch. He sent in the cross that clanked in off Giles' shins. He set up Sunderland's second with a lovely through ball for Wilson Isidore, who's also been a revelation this season. And I guess Reggie Lebris must know Lefebvre from his time at Lorient, because that's where he was before he went to Roma. But what a player he was in that game anyway. Long may it continue.
He's a bit of an odd case, Lefebvre, because he was very much someone who there was a buzz around the signing for Roma in the summer. But Roma, as just alluded to, had this very chaotic last few months, and Ghisolfi, the sporting director, who's a French sporting director, who's brought in May, very much his guy Lefebvre, and very much signed in conversation with Daniele De Rossi, who had ideas for how he was going to use him. De Rossi gets fired, and suddenly there's Juric there who doesn't know what to do with him. So there was a lot of very positive noise about him as a player, and then we barely saw him for the months after De Rossi went. So fascinating to see him show up in Sunderland, and then, as you say, make a really bright start.
Finally, on to any other business. Alex has written in, "Dear Pod, on Monday I flew to Denmark solo with my 1-year-old daughter and her accompanying kit." Oh, well done. Well done to you, Alex. 5 minutes into the flight, the man in front of me spilt his coffee all over the middle seat/table, and I was able to help him by passing him nappy wipes to clear up the mess. I later noticed he had chosen to spend the flight doing a detailed analysis of the full match replay of Brentford against Tottenham, which seemed an odd way to spend a flight. I assumed he was either a scout or an odd football obsessive until he went to the loo, and I realised it was in fact actual Brentford manager Thomas Frank. So yeah, I guess sort of a combination of scout and football obsessive in a way. He asks, has anyone on the panel ever managed to assist a Premier League manager in a similar way? He says, I didn't get an autograph, partly as it seemed rude to bother him, and partly as the only thing I had to hand was a picture book about a mouse and mole flying a kite. And that actually reminded me, I had to text Max about this, because his dad famously got his copy of Plato's Republic signed by Trevor Brooking at a Cambridge match, didn't he? I'd love to have a collection of strange autographs on weird things. Anyone got anything to add on helped a Premier League manager out?
I once held a door open for Maurizio Pochettino at Tottenham's training ground, and he refused to walk through it until I went before him, and we basically had a door standoff.
How long were you there
and
for?
I often think, if I hadn't capitulated, he might still be the Spurs manager.
He's not quite a Premier League manager, but I did a really good, well, I say really good, I had a really fun day doing a behind-the-scenes piece with Robbie Savage at Macclesfield earlier in the season for The Guardian. And I thought, oh yeah, we built up a really nice rapport. And my wife and I, one of the things we love doing is going to watch local non-league football. So we're big on the Northern Premier League West Division. I saw a player play for Nantwich Town. I thought, oh, maybe Robbie Savage might like to have a look at him for Macclesfield. So I texted him my recommendation and never heard anything back. So, I tried to help a manager and was completely blanked.
No wonder your wife has her own bedroom if that's what you're doing in your leisure time.
She's a lucky, lucky lady. I think we can all agree on that. That'll do for today. My thanks to Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicky.
Thanks.
And thank you, Sam. You can pop your Tottenham scarf on now.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard. We'll be back tomorrow.
This is The Guardian.